Hey ladies, welcome back to the show. I'm your host Trisha, and on today's episode, we are going to explore how to start or modify a habit so that you are able to achieve the health goal or any behavioral goal that you desire. What we are going to talk about in the 7 steps that we're going to talk about are going to be incorporating strategies used by the book Atomic Habits. The author is James Clear. For some reason, that is always the book that I come back to when I am trying to form my own new habit. About a month or so ago, I decided that I wanted to start making changes, and in particular to start walking, to make that a priority to help with some cravings and hormonal fluctuations, hormonal changes related to perimenopause, possible postmenopausal. And one of the symptoms that was really hurting me, or that I felt like I needed a little help with, is my anxiety, which feels like it has gotten so much worse despite being on medications and seeing a therapist. I didn't want to increase my anxiety meds. I felt like there was probably something that I could do on my part to be able to reconnect with myself and to create some space that I can have some quietness. And so walking for me in this context was not doing something in terms of physical activity, but more as a way to take care of myself. So I started going back to try to make this a routine for me and trying to make it a habit and utilizing some of the steps that is utilized in the book Atomic Habits. And so today we are going to talk about those 7 steps in terms of creating a routine. And I'm going to weave my story in some of these steps so that you can see where maybe you can do some of the things that I'm doing, or maybe you need to tweak things like I do too. And it's also an effort that you can see that it's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be easy at the beginning. There are going to be things that are going to need to be adjusted. And even if you are in an established routine, there are going to be times when that routine, because of life circumstances, is going to need to change in order for you to continue to do it and to like it. So today we're going to talk about these 7 steps to help either modify or create a routine, a behavior change that you desire so that you're able to achieve the goal that you are working on. Step 1 is starting small and making that goal achievable. One of the things that I see often is that, especially when it comes to health, that most people are relying on motivation. And motivation will come out of nowhere with a strong desire for this big change. And there's usually this large lifestyle transformation that happens, but then it wanes. And then there's no follow through on it. One of the core principles of Atomic Habits is focusing on small, incremental changes instead of ambitiously overhauling your entire lifestyle all at one time. Why small goals are so important, and why I always preach about small goals, is that it helps create that feeling that you are successful. And if you're able to keep working towards those small goals, they feel achievable. It gives you confidence that you can do it. And then that is what allows you to create the momentum and leads to motivation so that you can keep working on your goals. Rather than the motivation coming and going, you have that consistency because your goals are achievable, which carries the momentum and then achieves the goal in the long term. Small goals will allow you to take action rather than sitting on the sidelines feeling like you're too scared or too overwhelmed to start at all. Small goals will help create consistency and engagement, and you're just going to feel like you're able to work towards your goal rather than too scared to take any action at all. Sometimes you'll also hear about this word called micro habits, and that is also in this way of having small goals. But with micro habits, you're going to take like whatever your big goal is and then break it down into a whole bunch of small habits that over time, as you start to get better and better at each habit, that you're able to achieve the big goal that you have. And you would never do these micro habits and change them all at one time. You would just have one goal, get good at it, move on to the next goal, add on to it, add the next goal. And then over time, as you become consistent with each piece of the equation, you would just keep moving forward. And then ultimately you would get to the bigger goal that you're trying to achieve. I think when you're able to like break down the bigger goal into these really small steps, it feels much more manageable and it keeps you from feeling overwhelmed and stopping to not take any effort at all in terms of trying to work towards your goal. So when we're talking about the first step, starting small and making it achievable, what are some ideas here? Well, if you're somebody who decides that you want to drink more water, maybe you start drinking water with meals as opposed to just at certain times of the day. Or you start to time yourself in terms of, okay, it's lunch, I have to drink water. So that you are starting small, but it's a totally achievable goal. If you are somebody who wants to improve your fitness, maybe you, instead of diving into a full 1 hour workout, you do like 10 to 15 minutes of something. That's where you start. And then if you can do more, you do that. For me, with my walking example, I found that when I went back and I was looking at my phone to see how many steps I was taking, it was pretty low, my baseline. I think it was about like 15,000 steps. And remember, I'm only doing this walking at this point in time as a way to have self-care and to help with my anxiety and just to help with all of the feelings of discomfort that I'm feeling. And so I'm not wearing like a watch or anything. I'm simply using my iPhone and I'm using like that iHealth app on there. I don't want anything that is going to create any more stress on my body. So that's what I do. I just use my iPhone health app. And so what I realized is that I wasn't really taking that many steps. My baseline was about 15,000 steps. And so to make it small and achievable for me, I decided that I was going to double that number. And then my first week, I was going to try to walk 30,000 steps. This is still going on, this routine. I'm still trying to modify it. But I felt like 30,000 steps was something that I could achieve. Baseline, I think the data from the literature suggests that most Americans walk only 3,000 to 4,000 steps per day. So if that's 7 days a week, that's 28,000 steps. I could probably do 30,000 steps, small and achievable. And guess what? It was for me. I was able to achieve that for the first goal. And so for me, it felt like, oh, I can do 30,000 steps. Great. Let me keep going. The second step here is to anchor your routine to existing habits. And this is one that I've found to be really helpful in my own life. In the book Atomic Habits, James Clear introduces the idea of habit stacking, where you anchor a new habit onto something that you are already consistently doing. The thought here is that since you're already consistently practicing that one habit on most days of the week, that adding something onto that habit will increase the likelihood that you'll do it. Because they find that you're more likely, you already have an established pattern in your brain of the first habit. And so if you're able to kind of add on to it, it helps establish a new pattern by reducing decision fatigue and then also increasing the consistency of you doing it because you're already doing the first part of it. And they also believe that habit stacking makes it easier to remember to do it because you're already doing the first part or the first habit, and that it can be integrated into your day more successfully, easier than forming a whole new habit. Some examples of habit stacking or anchoring your routine to existing habits would be in the morning time if you are brewing a cup of coffee or drinking some tea and waiting for it to be done. What can you do during that time to add on to what you already do every single morning? If you are somebody who is working on a habit of increasing your hydration, could you fill up your family water bottles for the day? If you are somebody who is working on getting your vitamins and minerals and taking your medications every day, could you do it at that time? If you're somebody who is trying to bring your lunch to work most days of the week, is that a time that you can make your lunch and get yourself ready for that meal and bring it to work with you? If you are somebody who is trying to establish a nighttime routine, if you brush your teeth at nighttime or when you brush your teeth at night, what would that look like if you added something to the end of that? Would you put on face cream? Would you listen to a quiet meditation? What would you do differently? Add it on to something that you're already doing. In my walking example, I have a babysitter one day a week that picks up my son, and I know that I have to be home at a certain time. Previously, if I left work a little bit early, I would either sit in my car for a little while and scroll on social media before I had to be home by this certain time. Or maybe I would just do something so that I didn't really have to be home. But what I tried to do, what I've now done one time, is that instead of sitting in my car scrolling on my phone, I essentially pulled up somewhere like at this park near my house, and I just got out of my car and I walked for 10 to 15 minutes. But it was great because I'm already doing the drive home, and then I just made that slight modification where I put my phone down and I did the walking instead of scrolling on my phone. So during that 10 to 15 minutes, I was able to get so many more steps than I would have if I just scrolled my phone and then at the end of the day been I wish I would have walked more. Step 3 is this idea that you're designing your environment for success. Your surroundings play a significant role in habit formation. You want to create an environment that makes it much easier for you to follow through on what it is you're trying to achieve. Your environment can either act as something that can drive you closer to your goal, or it can actually act as something that can be an obstacle and make it harder for you to achieve your goal. So you want to use your environment as a place to add visual clues to help support your goal, but knowing that you may have to remove some of the obstacles that are in the way, and that's going to prevent you from achieving success. If you are somebody who is really trying to work on having your house be serene and calmer, well, you're going to probably need to reduce some of the clutter. You're going to have to start thinking about what it is that you're doing in terms of electronics and if that's helping you or harming you. If you're somebody who's worried that you're not getting enough sleep, well, then you might need to take the phone that you're scrolling on as you lay in bed when you're trying to sleep, take it out of your room so that it doesn't act as a distraction for you. With my walking example, I have a walking pad in my house and I haven't really used it. It's just kind of there. And sometimes it can be a real distraction because I feel I have to get on that. And then sometimes it can actually be really helpful because if it's the end of the day and I haven't done my steps and it's too dark to go for a walk, then I can just hop on that. And I'm trying to make that be more helpful by scheduling things that I would normally do, but that I'm walking through it. So the other night I came home from work and I had gotten 2,000 steps. And I knew that I needed to get at least like probably 5,000 more. And I was just laying on the couch dreading doing any of the walking. But my son and I have been watching The Voice together. And so I was like, okay, when The Voice comes on, I have got to get on that dumb walking pad. And you know what? I did it. I didn't think that I would do it because it's 8 o'clock at night, but I did. And I got my steps in and I felt proud of myself. And guess what? My son was proud of me because I followed through on something that I did. So for me, in that particular instance, that walking pad was really helpful for me. And it created an environment where I didn't have a lot of distractions. And so for you, I want you to start thinking about what does success mean for you in terms of creating an environment that aids you in helping you get to the goal or the habit that you're trying to achieve. Because we've already established that you're going to have this new habit. You're going to start small. You're going to make it achievable as you start doing it. You're going to start anchoring something that you're already doing. You're going to anchor your new habit onto that. And then you're going to create an environment that's going to make it easier for you to do what it is that you want. I think I've talked about this before. I had this girl who would work out at home and sometimes she would go to the gym. And the big thing was like, how did she create an environment where she was able to have the things that she wanted around so that she could just go right to the gym? And so for her, it was this idea, and it's a little different, but I think it's just thinking of it in a broader term, is that what she realized is she always had to have her workout clothes with her because she knew that if she had them with her, then she would work out. And so even if she was going to come home and work out, she would have to get dressed at work and then come into the house and already be in her workout clothes in order to do it. And I've noticed that too. I wear scrubs to work, so it's very easy for me to go for a walk at work. But in the morning, I have to kind of know that I'm going to be wearing my sneakers and I'm not going to be wearing my clogs. And so I'm already planning ahead what I'm going to do for that goal to achieve in the day. And so most people, it's going to be some kind of planning to do what it is that you're trying to achieve. It's just not one day you form a habit. And anyone tells you that it's that simple is lying, because it's not. There's usually a lot of thought that goes into it that people just don't talk about. Step number 4 is building into that habit that you're trying to form some kind of accountability or reward system. Accountability allows you to take ownership and feel responsible for your actions. One of the really great things that accountability does is it allows you to see, are you making an effort to achieve your goals or are you not? And a lot of times when we know that we're not working towards our goals, we don't want to be accountable to ourselves because we know we're failing. But I challenge you to start thinking about it in a way that instead of discourages you, actually encourages you, because you don't have to be accountable to anybody else. You just have to be accountable to yourself. All of this is you versus you today versus who you were yesterday. And so if you can kind of get in that place that you're really just measuring what your effort is towards your goal and what your previous effort was and what you did, then it might take away some of the shame and the judgment that you're putting on yourself because you don't want anyone else to know that you're failing. You could have this idea that you're accountable to yourself and you check in with yourself. You could be accountable to a friend, whatever works for you so that you can start to see what your effort is and what the progress towards the goal that you're trying to achieve is, and to see if it's still a goal or if you need to tweak it in some way to better fit your needs. We can also talk about accountability in terms of you can partner in with somebody. You can say, hey, I'm working on trying to get this many steps per week or this hydration. Now, when I've done that in the past, when I'm checking in with somebody else, I have a harder time with accountability because I'm judging it. And so perhaps that's you too. What I find to be more helpful for me is checking in with myself weekly to see what actions I'm taking towards my goal. And sometimes I struggle with this too, but I've noticed that I already, on a weekly basis, on a Sunday, will sit down and figure out what I have to do for the week. And as a way of habit stacking, at the end of that little session that I have, that I'm writing down everything, I also write down how many steps I took Monday or Sunday through Saturday so that I can really count up my steps. And that seems to work for me because I'm already doing it. I'm already doing the first habit. And then it's a way that I'm checking in to see if I met my goal or not. And then I'm able to identify, okay, on Tuesdays, I don't walk that much. On Thursdays, I don't walk that much. And then on Fridays, sometimes I have a hard time too. And that's what I was able to find. And what that just did is it also helped me see what's happening for the upcoming week. And then kind of in my head start to figure out, okay, I'm going to have to modify a couple things this week if I want to achieve the goal that I desire. An example of a reward and having rewarding, like a reward for when you achieve the behavior. Some of the things that I was thinking about is like trying to celebrate your milestones, and you want the reward to be aligned with the habit that you're working on, right? So that's the first thing. Align the reward with the habit that you're working on. So if your habit is that you're working on self-care, then perhaps you would splurge on a cup of coffee at this cute little fancy coffee shop down the street from you that you normally wouldn't splurge on. Or maybe you buy a guided meditation app or a fancy diffuser or something like that helps create that sense of self-care for you. If you're somebody who is trying to form a habit of creating an exercise routine, well, then you would reward yourself with maybe either a new exercise class, exercise equipment, an exercise app, or a new video. Maybe you would have a new piece of workout clothes or socks or a headband or something fun or fancy because you're rewarding what you're doing with the habit that you're trying to form. Now, for me, as I started walking, the first week I was able to achieve 30,000. I should have rewarded myself. I didn't. The next week I met my goal. I was like, all right, I'm going to do 40,000. I met it, 42,000. The next week, 45,000 was my goal. I met it, 45,000. Now, I didn't reward myself in any of it. I was able to do some accountability, but it reminded me that I don't have to, there is a benefit in doing all of this, and that I think it would be really helpful for me to remember to reward myself for the effort that I'm making to achieve that habit. So for myself, that is something that I'm going to start doing as I achieve the goal, that I reward myself to do it so that I remind myself why it's important. And I think that's where I fail, and perhaps maybe you fail there too. So start thinking about how you can build in accountability, either by working with somebody else or self-accountability, and what are some of the rewards that you can kind of put in there to signify your progress and to acknowledge all the work that you had to put in that week to achieve the goal that you desired. Step number 5, reflect and adjust regularly. To ensure that your routine is effective, you need to have regular check-ins with yourself. And it allows you to really remember why you're doing it, how you can align with your goals, and it's going to help you figure out what can be improved. What is happening in your life that's different this week that you need to modify your routine to account for those difficulties. Questions can be helpful here in evaluating your current routine or just evaluating what it is that may be working for you or not working for you. Some of the things that I would start to think about is this routine moving you closer to the goal that you have? Are you feeling like, when we're talking about is it moving you closer, I don't want to focus purely on weight loss here. I want to start thinking about things and how you feel, right? So many times I think for women, we have these big goals and the goal always ends up being weight loss. But with weight loss, it can be so tricky because you could be doing all of the effort and not getting the gains because there could be something wrong with you. There could be body fluctuations. There's just going to be all of these things that if you're measuring your progress just on weight loss, there's a lot of variables that you can't control that you may be doing and putting a lot of effort in to achieve, but it's not reflected, and then you're going to give up. So I want you to think of some other things in a way that you can measure if what you're doing is bringing you closer to your goal. So are you less stressed? Do you feel more energized? Do you feel physically stronger? Do your cravings feel better controlled? Is your anxiety more controlled? Other questions could be, is this routine fitting comfortably into your schedule? Does it feel forced? Do you feel like you're making measurable progress, even if the progress is small? Do you have more endurance? Are you in a better mood? Is your sleep better? Starting to think about those things that are measurable. It's also important to know if you dread your routine, what part of it, why. Is the routine fun or not fun at all? Is it depleting you emotionally, physically? And trying to figure out if there's a way that you can tweak it to make it more enjoyable and sustainable for the long term. For my walking routine, I kept doing it, and I'm still in the process of doing it. But the 4th week I did it, my goal was to walk 50,000 steps, and I fell short. I think I did about 38,000 steps. And I knew it was happening because I was checking in at the end of the day to do so many steps. But I don't think that I planned ahead of time that great. And I had started a new job and I was in a different environment and I couldn't quite figure out how to squeeze it in. And so what I do, or what I'm working on now, is I kind of went through what my day looks like, and I realized the days that I don't walk that much: Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. And so on Tuesdays, I happen to be in a place where there's a lot of people walking, and it's like in an industrial park. And so I was able to do much more yesterday. I went from like 2,000 steps the week before to about 8,000 yesterday. And so for me, it's helpful to have and to be in a place where other people are doing the same thing. I realized that I needed to schedule it, because if I didn't schedule it at a certain time, I would just keep working through my lunch and not actually take any extra steps to make it happen. And so if I hadn't reflected on it, I would have kept failing. But because I reflected and adjusted it, I was able to do something differently yesterday. So I don't know if I'll be able to do that every Tuesday, but certainly I was able to achieve that. And I'm off to a good start this week in terms of getting closer to the 50,000 goal that I set. But again, reminding yourself, like, it's not one time that you're going to reflect and adjust. It's going to be all the time, because life is constantly changing. It's not linear, always making progress. It's back and forth, back and forth. And so you may be in a situation where you're modifying your schedule every week in some capacity. But the more you do it, the easier it's going to be. And you're going to get used to having to be flexible, because that's just part of the game. And for all these people who were able to achieve the things that you desire that you haven't had yet, that's one of the big things, is that they're adjusting what works for them. They're not just doing a one size fits all approach. They're doing something that works for their life, and they're getting more confident because they're able to adjust as they need to. And the more they do that, the more confident they feel that they're able to be flexible. And so they keep moving forward. Step number 6, embracing identity-based habits. This is also, all of these are James Clear Atomic Habits ideas, but this is one of the big ones. There is this emphasis on the power of identity in habit formation. James Clear talks about how every action you take is a vote for the type of person that you want to become. Instead of focusing solely on the outcomes, such as losing weight, you're really trying to align your routine and your habit with the identity that you want to embody. This allows you to see that the consistent actions you are taking aligns with the new identity of who you're trying to become. I think for a lot of people, we feel like that identity is so far from who we are now to what we're trying to be that it's hard to take all of that into consideration. And so you really have to start in these really small ways of changing your mindset from what you want to who you are. You can start to reflect on some of the things that you're already doing to become the person that you know and that you want to be. So instead of saying, I need to lose 10 to 15 pounds, which we've all said, instead start thinking about yourself as someone who prioritizes your health, that you're a person who eats nutritious meals, that you are somebody who works really hard in trying to form the habits to get you to a place that can make that weight loss happen. Instead of saying, I should meditate more, think more about this idea that you're somebody who practices self-care daily and someone who is starting to prioritize their own life versus what they look like or what they should be doing. For me, in terms of my walking example, I have always identified as somebody who works really hard and that kind of thinks that I take care of myself, but really I put everybody else first. So this was a really big one for me, that I have to start thinking in myself that walking for me is more of a way that I can start to identify as somebody who takes the time out of her day to think about what she needs and then gives that to herself. And maybe at some time in the future, this walking will also be in terms of like a weight loss effort, and maybe I'll think about it in that way too. But for right now, I think if you're somebody who's walking for weight loss, maybe thinking to yourself that you're somebody who values your body and you move your body every day because that's what your body needs from you. So starting to think of yourself in terms of the identity of the person that you're trying to become can be really, really helpful. It allows you to place ownership on what it is that you're trying to do, and allows you also to see what effort you're making towards achieving that identity or not. And then the last step in all of this is experimenting and staying flexible. Life is unpredictable and routines will constantly need adjustments. And I think for me, this is the most surprising thing of all. I think in terms of adjustments like, oh, I would just need to adjust something based on the season and the weather. But what I realize is that it's all the time that we're adjusting things. Approaching anything with your health and wellness is something that is an experiment that's going to change all the time, that if something isn't working, you don't keep doing it, you do something else. And anything that feels like failure to you isn't really failure. It's just feedback. It's not that you didn't do enough. It's that maybe what you didn't work for you. And so often we blame ourselves for not being able to achieve the goals or to slug and do something that we hate doing because that's what we feel like we need to do. But if we can just get out of that place of blaming ourselves for not achieving our goals and really looking at it in terms of, hey, maybe I didn't experiment enough. Maybe I didn't try a lot of different things. Maybe I failed at this before. It doesn't mean I'm going to fail at it again. It just means that I need to do something differently. I'm not a failure. That gave you feedback that particular way that you were doing it didn't work for you. So in terms of how are you going to stay flexible, start thinking about ways right now that your routine isn't working for you. What are you doing that doesn't allow you to be flexible? And by that same token, what is allowing you to experiment and stay flexible? If you're somebody who always plans a morning workout, but then you never quite get a workout in, maybe you're not a morning person and maybe you can't do it in the morning. Maybe you have to do 3 different times of the day. Maybe you're somebody who has to do something at lunchtime. Maybe you have to switch to evenings. If you're somebody who wants to meal prep and then you decide that you're going to meal prep like 5 meals of the week and then that doesn't work. Well, maybe you just work on prepping like 1 or 2 meals per week. And then once you get that situated, then you build on it. For me, in terms of my walking example, it changes all of the time. Sometimes I'm walking in the morning after I drop off my son. Sometimes I walk at lunchtime, depending on where I'm working that particular day. Sometimes I'll walk up to the closest convenience store to meet my friend and get a diet soda. And it's all an experiment. I don't quite know what is going to work to get me to the goal of 50,000 steps. I think I'm closer to it, but it's a lot of modifications and it's a lot of being flexible because life is always changing. And for me, it's just remembering that this is something that's important to me and that I can do it enough and modify my schedule enough that when I have meetings or it's going to be harder for me to get outside or the weather isn't that great, that I've done another adaptation before. And so I know how to do it and I can do it much easier than maybe I did before. So in conclusion, today, I want you to remember that in any routine that you're trying to create or form or modify, instead of focusing on being perfect or that something needs to be done a certain way, focus on progress over perfection. You don't want something to be so big that you can't actually achieve the goal because you're too paralyzed to start it. Start thinking about what you can do consistently, no matter how imperfect. That's going to help create sustainable routines that you can adapt into your ever-evolving, life-changing demands. This is going to be something that's going to help create action and progress to the goals that you're trying to achieve. And remembering the 7 steps that we talked about today, right? This will help you. Remember that you want to start small and make it achievable. Remember that you want to anchor your routines to existing habits and design your environment for success. That you want to have some kind of accountability, whether it's to others or to yourself, and then have a reward system in place once you achieve the goal that you have for this particular week, that you regularly reflect and adjust your routine, that you really start asking yourself questions of if you're moving closer or further away from your goal. If you like what it is you're doing, do you dread it? Do you need to do something that's more enjoyable and sustainable? Remember to start thinking about yourself as the person that you're trying to become and embrace identity-based habits. And then lastly, experimenting with something all the time and staying flexible. It's not going to be something that every day is easy to do. It's with any health change, there's a lot of progress forward, a lot of backsliding. And so it's trying to figure out what works for you. Remember, like when I'm doing this walking routine, I achieved my goals the first 3 weeks. But then the 4th week, I just couldn't do it. Like I just wasn't reflecting enough and trying to really form solutions. Had I not done that self-reflection, which I don't particularly love doing, I would have never figured out where I was stumbling. And then already this week, it's so much better because I was able to do that little bit of reflection, which isn't easy to do. But I think with anything, when you're making a behavior change, remembering that it's all a journey of small wins and that there's going to be setbacks and things that challenge you. But if you're able to get to a place that you become more confident, that you become more adaptable, it'll also help you be more resilient, and you'll be able to have a more sustainable routine that will be able to adapt and evolve over time. And that's going to be the key. And that's going to be the differentiation of somebody who achieves their goals and somebody who doesn't. So for you, what is it that you want to work on in terms of your habits? I want you to look at the routines that you're doing that is working for you and the habits. And I want you to start thinking about what you've been trying to do, but you haven't quite been able to get there. And start figuring out how you can stack habits onto what you're already doing, how you can start thinking about what it is that you want to work on, what your rewards will be, how you'll be accountable, and what are some of the things that you can do to reflect and adjust and really find out what you want to do, what you enjoy to do, and what could work for your life. I thank you guys so much for listening, and please share this episode with anyone that you feel like is in a place that they're struggling, because all of these things that we talk about is a way and an effort to build community that you can do and have the thing that you want when it comes to a behavior that you're trying to change. But it's not always going to be easy. It's about normalizing it so that we all feel like we're in this together, and that somebody doesn't have this superpower that you lack, or this skill or this determination that you don't have, that you can have it too. But you just kind of have to do some of this inner work and know that it just takes time, and that you start from somewhere and you get better at that one small thing. And then over time, you keep building on it. And then you will become the person and achieve the goals that you desire. So I will see you guys back here next week. I'm sorry for the long episode. And thanks again.